Um, so here are some examples of obvious signals, right? So we could anchor this in more obvious, and then we'll get to subtle. Here's some obvious signals that I think are green flags that would enable me to easily feel like I could get the progress towards a conversion. Um, somebody said to me, like, leads are super inconsistent. I'm not sure what's off, goes up and down. That's demonstrating that they're revealing problems that then it makes it easy to kind of say, well, why don't we hop on a call, or why don't we talk about that? Why don't we
Yeah.
solve that problem? If somebody told me that they loved my post, or they reached out to me because they saw office hours, or, an inbound lead, well,
Mhm.
at that point, I feel like they're giving me permission to be able to ask them if, hey, do you want to connect? Do you want to have a conversation? I feel like they've told me that they want to network with me. So I view that as a green flag. How do you help clients with this? I get this all the time, right? If you're having a conversation, somebody asks that question, what exactly do you do? How do you help clients with this? Once they've asked me that question, I feel like, well, let's talk about it. Let me, instead of me trying to throw up everything, how to answer that question, it makes it a lot easier from a time management stance to start thinking about how do we transition towards a real life conversation, to progress to answer that question in a more thoughtful way. And also it'll help me personalize it so I can learn a little bit more about what you do too. So I know how do you help clients with this is somewhat broad. We want to focus on, well, what's the relevancy based off of what you're trying to accomplish. So I
Mhm.
don't want to say do a lot of video, um, podcast stuff if that's not what you want to do. So there's different ways that you could help clients with marketing. So we want to progress, trying to grow but stuck, interested to learn more. What are you working on? When these are examples of obvious signals that you are in control to transition. But let's talk about some subtle signals. This is where I think people really miss opportunities, because the natural inclination, especially on LinkedIn, when you can't read people's body language, is you make up that they're not interested when that might or may not be true. So here's an
Mhm.
example. Somebody says something that is short, not sure where to start. Is that welcoming? Is that short? Uh,
Uh, yeah, it's short. It shows a bit of vulnerability as well. It shows
totally.
how they don't have it all figured out, and so if you
Right.
read between the lines, I think it's sort of an invitation to share perspective. Could,
Absolutely.
could yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. So what I like to do in these types of things that are more subtle is I want to try to engage interest by slowly starting to progress towards, inquiring whether or not they're interested in having a conversation. So, being able to say something like totally understandable. Sometimes a quick call helps bring clarity. Can we connect for 15 minutes? Just
Yeah.
to kind of gauge interest. So, they gave me a subtle signal and I took the opportunity to gauge interest. Another example. Uh,
Mhm.
we've been meaning to explore that, just haven't gotten around to it.
Meaning to explore that, just haven't gotten around to it. Okay, that sounds like a warm response. That's in my mind. That sounds like an invitation to get something booked in the calendar
It's
to share
subtle,
perspective
but you
around
want
it.
to.
Yeah,
I think it's subtle, but it's worth pursuing. So
I would say that for sure.
yeah. So what I would say is there's no rush at all. But if it's helpful, I'd appreciate an opportunity to walk you through a few ideas together sometime this week or next week. So, I'm trying to anchor in some type of time period. I'm not rushing them. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be this week. It doesn't have to be next week. It could even be next month. But the idea is that when I see that, I don't want to just assume that they're not interested or
Mhm.
really be pushy. It's just now I view it as a subtle invitation to see whether or not they're interested in hopping on a call and having a conversation about it once
Yeah,
I've obviously progressed them. Okay. So
and
last,
and
yeah,
Colin, I might even throw in a bit of maybe an outside resource or something of value, or maybe a tip or two that directly addresses their issue, just to kind of feed them some crumbs, before throwing the whole loaf of bread, just to whet their appetite in a sense with that response.
yeah,
Say,
I,
hey.
I think that's a great idea. I think there's lots of different ways that you can progress. The importance is to pick up the signal. But I
Mhm.
agree that sending, I call like pre-selling mechanisms, like pre-selling content or resources to have at your disposal for your particular industry is always a great idea. Um, the flip side of that is sometimes I find that depending on where they're at, especially in like a subtle signal where they're not sure, potentially giving them too many resources in that moment when you're not understanding of relevancy yet, because you don't understand their level of urgency in these types of signals. You don't really understand whether or not they're a buyer, what the seriousness is of their willingness to potentially engage with an offer. So you don't want to overwhelm somebody until you feel like a resource is actually going to be of value to them. So I'm not saying it's kind of, you got to judge it based off of the
Yeah,
individual,
that's
their
what it's
background,
called.
their profile, like what they've kind of said. But yeah, I love resources, right? Trying to provide value is always the goal. Um, cool. So last one. Yeah, we've looked at a few options, but haven't found the right fit. So yeah,
Mhm.
I view that as a nice subtle signal. So the response, got it. You're still exploring. I'd be happy to compare notes live. Would a short chat be helpful? Right? Trying to have this subtle signal open to a see if they're I'm trying to qualify curiosity. Like, are you interested now that we've gotten here in us meeting? To just feel each other out. That's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. How do I think the answer is yes. If not, no problem. I'm not being pushy, but I'm here if you want to compare notes, especially
Mhm.
if you're demonstrating yourself as a thought leader in a particular area. Cool. Any other
Cool. Cool.
thoughts, feelings on this?
I especially love that closing. Would a short chat be helpful? That
Yep.
word helpful signals something in the human brain that lowers the guard, lowers the defenses, because from we're teeny tiny tots, we've been asking for help.
Yeah.
And so I think it brings us back to that state of vulnerability where we almost want to say yes, if somebody asks if it would be helpful. All
Yeah.
right, we don't want to say no because when somebody offers help, it's a universal sign of kindness. So it's almost like being a jerk to say no if somebody asks you if something would be helpful, you
Yeah.
know, for you.
So
So
I love that.